Hello everyone. I've had a reply from the government to my petition. The petition repealed the 2013-2017 H2 hybrid bills. Those are the acts of parliament that give them permission to sort of carry on with this project and halt all the HS2 work immediately. I'm going to read it through because I read it very quickly this morning before I had to go off and do things, but I want to sort of read it out loud together so that I can respond emotionally and rationally to what they're saying, because from a quick glance this morning it's just a normal spin, it's their script, so it's got nothing to do with actually whether HS2 is good for the country or not and should be going ahead, and indeed has not answered my questions that the petition raises. My petition reads: all works on H2 must stop immediately. A full review of the differences between what was originally approved and current project fundamentals must be carried out. The Act should be repealed. All ministerial approvals made to date should be forensically investigated and a new vote is needed. So if I explain the background to that, I don't believe that when the MPs have voted on HS2 in Parliament, the facts that they've been given bear any relation to the facts that exist now the notice to proceed has been given on this project. So there are fundamental differences. There's fundamental differences on the cost in particular, because it was originally only 33 billion, it's now 106, more likely to be 200 billion. The number of passengers being carried and the number of trains has gone down significantly, and the speeds in question. So fundamentally, when MPs were told about all these economic benefits, what the train line was going to do, etc., they were sold a pup. And I don't believe that the government carrying on with their notice to proceed is actually lawful because of that. And I'm looking to take them to court on this. We'll have the debate first. So the government's responded, and it said the government has decided that HS2 must go ahead to deliver essential north-south connectivity, greater capacity and shorter journey times alongside a revolution in local transport. So we'll just look at this. The north-south connectivity that it refers to is in relation particularly to Manchester and London. So at the moment, obviously you can get a train from London to Manchester, and they're saying that this will improve this. Now, if you actually look at the plans for HS2, the core objective, you have to excuse my little dog, she's wandering around, clicking on the floor, it's a bit annoying, is that it doesn't actually link the cities as the priority, it is the airports. So Euston and Birmingham Curzon are actually secondary to the key stations, which are at Old Oak Common and Heathrow, and at Birmingham Airport, which is in Solihull. It's not actually in Birmingham. And then if they do the second leg, it's obviously Manchester Airport, and then there's talk about Leeds Bradford Airport, etc. And HS2 is all about expanding the airports. It's all about facilitating shuttling people between the airports as separate runways, effectively. If you land at Birmingham Airport, it says London Birmingham Airport. It doesn't say Birmingham Airport. And yes, I have used planes before because I've lived and worked in California. So the response in full, we'll have a look at this now. As the Prime Minister announced on the 11th of February, the government has decided that HS2 will go ahead, alongside a revolution in local transport. Now, 11th of February, flashing piece of paper around, Boris Johnson announced on 11th of February that it was going ahead. Now, that was illegal in itself, because what he was actually saying was, Boris bluster, I am behind this project, it's going to happen, when he's actually lied to my face and his constituents' face about fighting this project, and if it was going to head, mitigate for it. So what he was doing by saying that on the 11th of February, before it had gone through the Treasury Select Committee and the Treasury protocols in order to be able to issue the notice to proceed, to actually start on site, he was conning the country by saying it was approved, when it was not. It did not have notice to proceed. And in the background, they've been scrabbling to make it pass the Treasury protocols for approval when it never did, which is something else that we can come on to in another video, I think. But it talks about this revolution in local transport. So they are putting additional money into local transport. But this is all arse about face, excuse the expression. The priority in order to reduce carbon in this country and to benefit the most amount of people is local transport. It is not HS2 with local transport tags on the end of it. And the amount of investment that's going into HS2 out of the transport budget is absolutely astronomical. I mean, we are talking about £200 billion, which only benefits the train line between London and Birmingham, and then if it goes further, Manchester, Liverpool and Leeds. If it ever gets to Scotland, we won't go into that right now. So they are putting extra money into local transport, I understand that. But what they haven't told you about HS2 is that because there are only really 2 stations on phase 1, in order to get on it, you're going to have to drive to get on it, to access it. Even the Old Oak Common station doesn't include any cycle or pedestrian access. So how are you supposed to get there in a sustainable way? And local transport is all privatised. You have private bus companies operating. Many of them are going bust because of underinvestment and lack of use. And one of the reasons they have a lack of use is because of the underinvestment. It's unreliable, it's too expensive, and people want convenience. They want to be able to go from door to door of wherever they're going, particularly if they've got children. I'm a mum. I know what it's like to struggle with a pushchair and shopping and everything else, and biking everywhere, and with your kid in a trailer on the back. It's exhausting. And when it's raining, and it rains a lot in Britain, it's hard. And our elderly people, actually do spend a lot of money in our economy, and they want convenience too. And our local transport just isn't good enough because it's all privatised. There's no national strategy, there's no national connectivity, and there isn't any attached to HS2 because it's not to serve local people, it's to serve airport passengers and rich people. That's a very sort of broad brush approach, but I'm trying to simplify things here. So with the right reforms in place, doesn't say which reforms, HS2 will become the spine of the country's transport network, bringing our biggest cities closer together, boosting productivity and rebalancing opportunity fairly across the country. So this is all economic spin. The spine of the country's transport network. Well, if you consider the amount of passengers that are supposed to be travelling on this, over 300,000 a day, and there's only 2 stations effectively. People say there's 4, but I'm talking about the ones that are serving the airports. You're actually putting a lot of eggs in one basket economically and transport-wise, and it's very unresilient. The speed that this is going at, if there's a problem, the bottlenecks you're going to get from delays are going to be massive, absolutely massive. Think of all those people if they're stuck in Euston, or they're stuck in Old Oak, or they're stuck at Curzon, or they're stuck at Solihull Birmingham Airport, and there's a problem and the trains aren't running. Just where are these people going to go? It says about bringing our cities closer together. Now, we're all sitting at home right now in a pandemic using Zoom and other providers. We're already together. We do not need to travel to be closer together. This is a fallacy. This is unsustainable economic growth and unsustainable priorities. I do apologise about my Jack Russell. She's very old and she does what she likes, so you can hear her probably drinking in the background. Rebalancing opportunity fairly across the country. Well, no, it is a fact that everywhere else in the world where high-speed rail networks, new ones have been built, that they always benefit the stronger economic centre, and that is London. So what you're actually doing, if you discount the airport passengers, is you're actually providing a vortex down to London for workers, and you're pushing home ownership and everything up the track into lower zones. So some people might say, yes, that has an economic benefit, but it's not a sustainable one. What it does, it actually polarises poverty, because you end up with rich centres around these areas and you just push the poverty out. It's not about rebalancing the economy at all. It's about polarising the rich against the poor. And I hate using those words, because saying poor is really, it's a very negative thing to say about people. But again, I'm trying to simplify things. So the government's decision to proceed follows careful consideration of Douglas Oakerby's independent review into HS2 and wider evidence, including the imminent phase 1 full business case, environmental concerns. No, it didn't include any environmental concerns. It wasn't on the remit, as a range of other things. So they're admitting here in their response, even though the notice to proceed was given a few days ago, that the business case wasn't ready. And Douglas Oakerby's independent review did throw up serious concerns about the economic case and everything else to do with HS2. But again, I will go back to the point that this petition is not about these reviews and this spin. It is about, did they follow due legal process before they made these decisions? And did they mislead Parliament and the UK before they did so? And they did. We know they did, because they've been rewriting the business case since day one to make it achieve things it doesn't achieve. So this review was tasked with testing all the existing evidence on the project and considering, among other things, how and whether to proceed with HS2. And that's not true. If you look at the remit for Oakerby, it was only asked to look at the benefits. It wasn't allowed to look at, it wasn't tasked with looking at the negatives on HS2 whatsoever. The remit actually says we're only here to look at the benefits. What's the next bit? So affordability and efficiency. So originally it was actually 13.6 billion, then it went to 33 billion, then it went to 56 billion. Now it's 106 billion, and we know it's going to cost at least over 200 billion. It's never been affordable. On the Treasury guidelines for on the cost benefit ratios for this project, it is deteriorated significantly since it was originally put forward for the bills and for the votes in Parliament, and it's even worse now. And some of the economic benefits that have been added to the revised business case this week are simply, well, they've been called fantasy, all sorts of things, because they were never there before, and all of a sudden they've come up, and it's just unbelievable, because it is not value for money at all. Never will be. We'll never own it, but we're paying for it, and we'll sell it off at a loss. And the debt, it's all national debt. Every single penny is debt. It will take us longer than our war debts to pay off, if we ever pay it off. The project has only recently been subject to a fundamental review. Well, it hasn't had a fundamental review. One of the emphasis on Chris Packen's case is that the environment has been consistently ignored. And the independent review, Mr. Oakerby himself used to chair HS2. So he has a pension from them. How does that work? The department understands the concerns raised by the public. However, successive governments have affirmed their goal to invest in transport infrastructure to meet growing demand for north-south movement and to strategically rebalance the economy. So again, they're talking about the north-south divide and chucking loads of money at it, and not actually dealing with the priorities, which are the people in the north who can't get on their trains to get to work in the morning. Both the 2013 Paving Act, which was not a hybrid bill, it says, so it's trying to correct me there, I will go back and look at that, and the 2017 Phase 1 Act received strong cross-party support. Now, yes, they did, but did they have that support based on facts and truth, or did they have it based on lies? Now, if they were based on lies, that is fundamental misleading of Parliament, and I believe of maladministration. But we have people marking their own homework here, so we mustn't forget that. This was particularly so in terms of the majorities that voted for the legislation. This continues to be the case with Phase 2A hybrid bill as it makes its way through Parliament. Only Parliament can repeal these acts. Yes, I know that. That's why I'm asking you to do it. And the recent High Court judgment in the case of Chris Packham, CBE versus Secretary of State for Transport, Prime Minister and HS2 Limited, the court specifically noted that there is a strong public interest in ensuring that in a democracy, activities sanctioned by Parliament are not stopped by individuals merely because they do not personally agree with them. The country does not want HS2. Every single poll in this country ever on HS2 has shown that the public do not want it. We have never been asked if we wanted it or not. Our MPs have been whipped into supporting it. The reason we have cross-party support is because of the way the donors on this project are involved. It is absolutely incredulous that the Labour Party support capitalist HS2 when it doesn't benefit the workers. It costs £200 billion of taxpayers' money for an asset that will be sold off, most probably to China, will never own, will never run. It's, you know, they're going to supply the steel, they're going to supply the workers, they already are supplying workers. It's just incredible. So they're trying to say that it's me and Chris Packham, basically, that object to HS2 when it's not. The fundamental part of Chris's action was regarding the environment. And he is in appeal, and I believe he will win his appeal. Right back in the beginning, in 2010, I had a meeting, an evening, well, I wouldn't say cocktails, a couple of gin and tonics with a leading barrister in the country. And she told me that the bar had been said that if they acted against HS2 Limited on any human rights or whatever cases in this country, their careers would be over. And I absolutely believe her. And I know of one very prominent lawyer, and that's exactly what happened to him, because he worked for me. And they destroyed him. It is also important to note that Phase 1 Act sets out the specific requirements of the railway to be constructed and the environmental minimum requirements, we'll come back to that because they've changed, that construction activities must comply with. Right, so the original environmental statements on HS2 were weak. They were really weak and they weren't good enough. And what we are actually seeing on the ground is that whatever it says on paper doesn't happen anyway. It just doesn't happen. And nobody takes responsibility. HS2 blame the contractors blame HS2, or they blame Natural England, blah, blah, blah. And they've got this circle of, you know, liability that, but at the end of the day, the government is responsible for this. Boris Johnson is responsible for HS2. He is in charge. Never mind Shaps. He's just, you know, just does what he's told. And what they've done in the last 12 months, this was snuck out, I think it was just before Christmas, is they've revised the environmental statement, and it's now just 2 pages for over 140 miles of the biggest construction project in Europe. I know people watching this are going to be people like me who are opposed to HS2. So please excuse my flippancy in the way I'm approaching this. I will do a more measured response to this where I'll write things down and everything else. But I just wanted you to sort of get into my psyche and understand where I'm coming from. So HS2 Limited cannot deviate from these specifications and requirements without new powers being sought from Parliament. So cutting down the ancient woodlands at Crackley Woods and Broadwell Woods without any environmental mitigation, according to this, is illegal. And what are they doing about it? Nothing. Nothing. Since October 2017, since I was at Harville Road, the day they started work with Sarah Green chained to a digger, they have not provided a single piece of bat mitigation, and they've cut down millions of trees. I've watched them. We had a tree at Harville Road with a roost in that we'd filmed, and everyone ignored us. Natural England, the police, and they cut it down and they chipped it in front of us. And when the police did eventually come, because we just wouldn't let it drop, they said we can't do anything because there's no evidence. And that's why they chip everything. They needed the dead bodies of the bats, basically. Having a picture of the roost and the video of the roost wasn't enough to show that the bats had been killed. So an array of legally binding undertakings and assurances made to organisations and individuals along the route. So all the people that have had their lands and their businesses and their homes stolen from them and haven't been paid, what do you think they think of those undertakings? And my dog is moving the camera. I'm very sorry about this. Maddie, go and lie down. And effective monitoring arrangements to ensure HS2 Limited compliance mean that HS2 Limited will deliver the railway as specified by Parliament and also constructed in the way specified by Parliament. Well, that's my point. When the Acts were passed, it was a different railway. The direction might be the same, but the detail wasn't there, and we're not running the same trains, we're not running the same amount of passengers. So that affects the business case, and it affects the carbon, and it affects everything else. So we're not getting what we paid for effectively. In setting out the decision to proceed with HS2, the Prime Minister made a clear commitment to drawing a line under past problems of transparency and cost control on HS2. This was his decision on the 11th of February that wasn't a decision. By the way, it was just a statement. And a recognition that going forward things must change. Well, now we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're seeing less transparency. The revised business case is redacted and redacted and redacted. We're seeing illegal acts daily. We're seeing complete and utter disregard for the COVID-19 restrictions on sites, putting people at risk. And zero transparency. I mean, Andrew Leadsom did a little video, I think it was today, and Greg Smith's done a letter for the group of MPs that are opposed to this carrying on in the way it is, highlighting the lack of scrutiny and the fact that Parliament's not sitting and they force this through in the middle of the pandemic when we're facing the worst economic recession since the last century. £200 billion when our nurses are dying because they don't have PPE. I'm sorry if I get angry. I'm going to get even more angry by the end of this video because we should be angry. The department is improving discipline and oversight with a full-time dedicated HS2 minister who will take part in monthly cross-government meetings similar to the delivery of the 2012 Olympics. Well, that was good, wasn't it? And provide regular updates to Parliament on progress. Has this man replied to a single person being evicted? No. Has he replied to any of the environmental organisations raising concerns? No. What has he done? He spent a lot of time talking with the Northern Powerhouse, via Zoom, by the way, about how business can benefit from HS2 and vice versa. They even had the cheek to say yesterday that the powerhouses and business were leading the way against the COVID-19 pandemic. Remembering that the powerhouses only exist because of HS2 and they're sponsored by Arup, part of the global cartel that's behind this project and all of the HSR schemes around the world. No mention of the NHS. So the department has now published its full business case for phase 1, which underpins the decision to authorise notice to proceed and allow construction of phase 1 to commence. So all of this has been done without Parliament sitting, without the Treasury Select Committee actually seeing it before they had their latest scrutiny committee that was aired on Parliament TV. In fact, the chairman, the lady chairman of that committee, didn't actually understand that they hadn't got notice to proceed when she opened the meeting. The phase 1 full business case sets out the rationale for the first part of the HS2 scheme between the West Midlands and London. It can be found on the following link. Yeah, I know where to find it all. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in whether you followed the law when you issued the notice to proceed and whether the bills that were passed and the Paving Act actually are the same as what's actually happening. Is the project the same thing that was approved and was voted on? No, it isn't. And I believe all of our MPs should be given a chance to review that. And I believe there should be criminal investigations into deliberate maladministration in government on HS2. Despite Doug Oakervy's recommendation of reducing the frequency assumption for HS2 to 14 trains per hour, the government has maintained its existing service planning assumption in the business case of 17 trains per hour, when it was a lot more than that at the beginning, concluding that there are benefits of running a high-frequency service as it affords the government the flexibility to serve more destinations in the future, supporting the government... Hold on a minute. We're going to have to take this a bit at a time. So even Doug Oakervy said we need to drop the number of trains. And the reason is because it's not technically possible to run the amount of trains that they're saying they need to. But the reason they're sticking with the number of trains is if they don't, the economic case doesn't stack at all when it didn't anyway. It makes it far worse. To serve more destinations in the future. The train line goes from London to Birmingham, or rather, Heathrow to Solihull Birmingham Airport. So which more destinations are you going to serve? There is a plan that was deleted by mistake in 2017 that shows HS2, I'll say 2 because it's 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, linking every single airport in the country, including down to Bristol, Bournemouth, the lot. And it's all about turning the whole of the UK into a hub airport for Europe. So maybe that's what they're talking about. But there's also the East and the West rail links that are happening around Heathrow and the Arc, and they're all interconnected. It's infrastructure crazy. And there's this idea that the more you build this massive infrastructure, the more economic growth you get, and the more money and the more jobs and everything else. But it's very vulnerable and it's very fragile. The pandemic shows that. You know, people, this is all based on economic growth, it's based on air travel. People just are not going to be taking the flights and risking things as they have done. We have to look at more sustainable options in our life. We need culture change in order to prevent climate change. And the figures, just like they were on HS1, are just not going to be there. The passenger numbers are not going to be there. So the value for money that's appalling already just isn't there. And the environmental costs are too high. You know, we've lost parts of Crackley Woods and Broadwell Woods in the last week, and it is utterly heartbreaking. Boris Johnson has felled Henry VIII and Shakespeare's Forest of Arden for this. Completely unnecessary project. And he has a baby on the way. I don't understand the psyche of the man. I really, really don't. So HS2 will spread prosperity and productivity across the whole country, bringing our great cities closer together and forming the spine of our nation's transport network. It does sound like Jackanory, doesn't it? The upcoming business case will show that these benefits continue to outweigh the project's costs. So this was obviously written before they issued the business case this week, signed with the Department of Transport. Now this was triggered at the 10,000 signatures. At 100,000 we have to have, or they have to consider giving us a parliamentary debate. And that's my next task, is I need everyone in this country who's disgusted at our doctors and nurses being asked to reuse PPE in an airborne viral pandemic to sign this. They're spending £250 million a week on this project already, and that's going to increase. And the pictures on the 11th of February, and Boris was saying, it's got the go-ahead, it's got the go-ahead. He's there in his brand new HS2 PPE, head to toe, as are there thousands of workers, all logoed, one of their friends is getting a nice cut from these orange suits. That, you know, he knew about the pandemic then. When he was walking around that site in Birmingham in that brand new PPE, he knew about the pandemic and he could order enough PPE for all the HS2 workers, but not our doctors and nurses. HS2 will never, ever stack up economically for this country. It certainly doesn't environmentally. What it's doing right now is they're proceeding, as we're aware, and they're putting thousands I hear 11,000 workers out across the country as we speak, travelling from all over the country. They're coming from Scotland, Wales, all sorts of places to work on this project. They're not following COVID-19 restrictions. They are actively working when sick. We have video footage, we know they are. And even if you don't care about the workers infecting one another, which they shouldn't have to be in that situation, they are victims as well, even if they are ignorant about it and don't care. They shouldn't be in that position. We have a statutory duty of care. The government has a statutory duty of care to them and to us. They are invading local communities that are already on their knees, where jobs have been lost, where homes and futures and lives have been stolen, and people have actually committed suicide because of the treatment of the government here. And they're in our shops, and they're abusing local residents. They're acting in the most vile, horrible manner, like an out-of-control army. They regularly ignore the law. When journalists have tried to film some of the awful things that are going on, they've been threatened with arrest. The police are turning a blind eye to assaults. It doesn't matter whether you're for or against the protests. If you believe in this country and you believe in what is right, you should believe in the law being upheld. And it's not. People are being seriously hurt. They have been since 2017. I had my ribs broken myself by 5 of them for standing on a public footpath filming them cutting down the first ancient woodland New Year's green covert. And the police lied and HS2 lied. And I can prove that. But I'm waffling a bit now, so I'm going to go back to the petition. The petition is about, and I will remind people that I was asked to change the wording. So I was told I couldn't put in notice to proceed in there, couldn't refer to that, and I couldn't refer to maladministration, and I couldn't refer to any of the criminal investigations that are actually being carried out right now by the Serious Organised Crime and Fraud Office. My petition, I want Greg Smith, Andrew Leadsom and all the other MPs to be prepared to force this debate through once we get our 100,000 signatures, to talk about this in Parliament and follow the democratic process and question the legality of what is happening. Now, 2 things will happen. One, it will be a fudge, like it was with the netting debate last year, where actually we had full cross-party support for what we were trying to do. But it was overruled by the chairman, Heather Wheeler. So we'll either get a good debate where all of these things come out, and more of that spin will obviously come from the pro MPs who are part of whatever, either on the gravy train financially or on the gravy train politically in their ambitions for their careers. Or we might actually expose some issues that could, hopefully help us, if nothing less. If this project does go ahead, I want